I am here today with Elliott Broom. He's the Chief Operating Officer at the Detroit Institute of Art. How you doing today, Elliott?
I'm doing well, Chris. Thanks for asking. How
Well,
are
Elliott,
you?
I am doing wonderful. I am, to be honest with you, I am really excited to have this conversation. You've got some amazing things going on there at the institute, and I am excited to dig into that. But I think to start with, any hospitality person, if you are listening to this, you're probably not grasping what's sitting behind Elliott right now, but he's got the photos, with the signatures around. When you leave a hotel property, you always get these things. So Elliott's definitely got a hospitality background hiding behind the chief operating officer at the Detroit Institute of Art. So I think that's a great place to start. Elliott, do you mind like kind of walking us through your background and kind of how you got where you were today?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to, Chris. So as you stated, yeah, I have a background in the hotel business. I worked for many years in hotels. I started as a bellman, kind of frontline staff member, as so many of my compatriots in the hospitality business, did. We started kind of ground floor and worked our way through and up. So that's what I did. I was in college, worked for the Ritz Carlton hotel. There was a Ritz Carlton down the street from where I went to school, which was the University of Michigan at Dearborn. So I was able to work at the Ritz, and I decided after working there for many years, an opportunity availed itself to step into a supervisory role. So I did that, and then one thing led to another, and I was able to move into management with Ritz Carlton, and I stayed with them for 11 years actually, and then another opportunity opened up, and so I was able to broaden my horizons and moved out to California and worked at a venerable hotel called the Four Seasons Los Angeles at Beverly Hills, which was quite an incredible experience for me. I learned a lot. I met a great many incredible people. So spent years working there in management. Ultimately, I wanted to get back closer to Detroit, and an opportunity opened up for me in Chicago. The first hotel was at the Peninsula Hotel, and I worked there for about a year. And then while I was working at the Peninsula, a company at that time that was still fledgling, I would state, with Kempton Hotels. They had an opening at one of the hotels that allowed me another opportunity to grow my career. So I jumped over to Kempton at the Hotel Monaco. Worked there for about a year and a half, and then had the opportunity to be on task force and open up a couple more Kemptons down in Texas. And then ultimately, from being on task force, it opened up an opportunity for me to become a hotel manager at a Kempton property in Dallas. So I moved there, and then lo and behold, after about a year and a half at the Hotel Palomar in Dallas, a position opened up in Detroit, my hometown, at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and it was what I viewed as an opportunity that I could absolutely not pass up, to be able to move back to Detroit, be closer to family, work for a world-class art institution, and do something that I was preparing for a very long time, and that was be responsible for the day-to-day operation as the vice president of museum operations. And so that's what I did. And ultimately, over the years, I've worked here now for nearly 14 years. The position opened up to become the chief operating officer, and I applied for that role and quite gratefully was selected. So that brings me to where we are today, Chris.
Well, I think everybody listening, if they've ever worked in a hotel or built a career in hospitality, whether it's hotels, restaurants, whatever that is, they're just shaking their head like, yep, I understand exactly how that goes. Started with one place, moved across the country, moved another across the country, moved back up again, finally came home, and all kinds of new opportunities. So I think that's absolutely great. And I hope anybody who's listening is, realizing that hospitality is always an amazing industry, and you can always grow in it, but there's always something past it if you decide you want to pivot and do something else, which clearly you have, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. As I said, the position ultimately that I'm in today is something that I prepared for many, many years while working in the hotel business, because I was able to transfer those skills that I learned working, for incredible leaders in all of the varying hotels that I worked for. I was able to transfer all of that skill to what I do here at the museum.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about the museum. So, you said world-class facility, there in Detroit. Talk to me about the museum, because I know Detroit's been, in a massive resurgence over the last decade or so. How does the museum fit in? What does the museum look like? What do you guys got going on there?
All right. So the Detroit Institute of Arts, that all of us here in Detroit just refer to as the DIA.
The DIA, got it.
It is, the fine art institution, the encyclopedic museum of Detroit. And, it's a museum. The building that we're in right now opened in 1927. It is a traditional Beaux-Arts building, typical to all of the fine art museums that were built in that essential time frame, that decade. So think the Metropolitan Museum in New York, which I would consider, the grand dame of U.S. art museums, or the Art Institute of Chicago, or the St. Louis Museum of Art. All of them had a very similar style of architecture. As again, I refer to it as a Beaux-Arts style of architecture. We're a very large building. We, over the years from 1927, in the 60s and 70s, we added two wings onto this museum. So ultimately, we expanded to where we are today, which is 650,000 square feet of space. Of that 650,000 square feet, a little over 400,000 is dedicated to gallery and public space. So it's a massive building, that takes a tremendous team of professionals to run on a daily basis. And the similarities come in when you think that this is a building that we have to have people here 24 hours a day. There's a full staff that has to be here 24 hours a day to make sure that everything about this building is working as it should, which is not unlike the hotel business. When you cut that ribbon and you open the doors to the hotel, those doors never lock, and that hotel is open 24 hours a day. So I always, say that the only difference is at the end of the day, our visitors go home, whereas at a hotel, your visitors or guests are staying overnight.
Absolutely. Now, the DIA, you all have a very exciting exhibit going right now. Is that right?
We do. It's called Van Gogh in America. It just opened last week, and it will be on view until January 22nd of 2023.
So, obviously, I think when people hear Van Gogh now, a lot of people think of the immersive Van Gogh and, the art spinning around the room and all the rest of that. Yours is not anything like that. Can you tell us a little bit about the exhibit?
Absolutely. I'm chuckling only because people have confused this exhibit with the immersive Van Gogh exhibit, because we've had two different immersive Van Gogh exhibits in Detroit, not at the DIA, but they've been here. And the big difference, Chris, is that unlike the immersive, and nothing against the immersive Van Gogh exhibit, I've been to see it myself and found it fascinating. But the big difference is with this exhibit, we have 74 original works by the master, who was Vincent van Gogh. And that's unique. It's unique, and I'll even go as far as to say it's extraordinary that we would be able to obtain loans of 74 works by Vincent van Gogh to be able to come to Detroit and be on view for this exhibition. If you're not, I wouldn't have understood that if I didn't work in the museum business, just how unique and extraordinary it is to obtain loans of this magnitude to be on view for our public to enjoy.
So you talk about loans, of this magnitude, right? So where are you getting these works from?
So the loans come from across the world, and they come from other fine art museums, from maybe institutions that may hold a work by Vincent van Gogh in this case, and in some cases, which is also quite extraordinary, from individual donors. So we have some works that were actually loaned by people who hold these in their private, their personal collections, whether they hang in their homes or in their businesses or in their offices. They have been generous enough to loan us some of their works of art, so that, again, the public can see these works of art, which normally none of us would have the opportunity to see unless we were invited as a guest. So, other museums, in France and in the Netherlands and in the Middle East and from across the United States, it's kind of, again, I keep using the term extraordinary only because it's the best term I can find to really qualify this exhibition. And in fact, I will say that our arts publication called Arts Newspaper referred to this exhibition as the exhibition of a generation, because the DIA certainly won't be mounting an exhibition like this for quite some time. And I don't know that a great many museums, at least in the United States, will be doing so either anytime soon.
So has anything with Van Gogh been done on this scale in the US before?
Sure, there have been multiple really fine Van Gogh exhibitions held in the United States. I mean, many of the major museums, some of which I mentioned, the Met and the Art Institute and the Museum of Fine Arts Boston and Philadelphia and so forth and so on. We all mount major art exhibitions. It's part of our responsibility to the publics that we serve to be able to bring works of art together and tell stories. However, one on this scale, like I said, with 74 works of art and works that come from not only other institutions across the country and throughout the world, but also from private lenders, that's what makes this really, makes it unique.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And I hope, it's my great hope that, a great many people in the public realize what a special opportunity we all have to be able to come and see this exhibition, because once the exhibition closes, and people have already asked, is this going to be extended? That's a question I got, in the first week of its opening. And I can tell them quite assuredly, no, it will not be extended. When the show closes, and this art takes off, like rockets, traversing the planet, going back to all of the varying homes, back to the ownership.
So when you're doing something at this level, I mean, what kind of goes into, planning this, executing it, the detail, take me through some of that.
So thanks. That's a really good question. And it takes an incredible amount of work and from so many people. This exhibition has been in the planning, I believe its inception was 10 years ago. It was originally supposed to take place in June of 2020, but we all know what happened in March of 2020 with the pandemic. So we had to postpone this exhibition. So that added 2 more years to the timeline. But during that period, there's just a lot of work that goes into obtaining the loans of the works of art, and then figuring out what story are we telling through these works of art. And every work of art has a very specific place in that story's narrative. So we have a team that does nothing but work on the story. That's the curator. And then we have the exhibition team. They're working with designers to determine, well, what does the space look like? And you don't know what the space looks like until you understand what the story is that you're trying to tell with the works of art. And then you move into the logistics. How do you move all of the artwork to and from the museum? So that's a different department that handles it. They're called the registrars, and that's all they do is work on tracking art and understanding the requirements that are involved. And then you move into, once you have all of the, I consider that the back end work completed, then you move into the operational side, and it's the logistical side of exactly how are we going to execute this exhibition, and how are we going to move people through the building, and where are people going to park, where are people going to eat, how are people going to enter the building? And so, when I think of where are people going to eat, we actually built a pop-up restaurant as a bit of a release valve during this exhibition, because we already have 2 restaurants in our building, but we knew that those 2 restaurants during peak demand periods would become overwhelmed with visitors. So we felt that we needed a 3rd venue as a release valve again, so that it's another place for people to go. So we built out a space that we call Vincent, and we built it to be our food and beverage partners. They actually did some research on European restaurants, and they were looking at color schemes tied very closely not only to the exhibition but historically to Amsterdam. And so what we've created is this space that feels more like a small European bistro, and the menu is also tailored to what you would expect to find in a bistro. So think sandwiches on baguette, very simple European style sandwiches on baguette, or beef bourguignon as a warm dish, or a vichyssoise right now while it's still somewhat warm here. And then once we really move into the cool weather months, and we'll transition from a cold vichyssoise, whether we move to a hot vichyssoise or something else. But all the wines are French wines, so we're really trying to keep it authentic and at the same time thematic.
That's awesome. So as you're dialing in the story and you're dialing in the operational logistics, what role does your team play in this, right? Because I got to imagine that, there's tons of meetings and tons of planning, but you're not really frontline, right? So like, how are you getting your team involved to make sure that, this is getting executed at a high level across the entire operation?
So another good question from you, Chris. At this point, and I'll say for the last 2 months, we've just eat, slept, and drank Van Gogh. Every waking moment at the museum has been consumed by a great many of us on the team, on the back end, the planning side. It's been consumed by Van Gogh. So I previously, prior to the opening of the event or the exhibition, I spent a great deal of my time in meetings where we talked about nothing but Van Gogh and about how we were going to stage and execute the event. And then that means pulling in all of the operational leaders, right? And so many directed conversations about Van Gogh, the exhibition, and then in turn they would then have conversations with their direct teams, many of whom are frontline team members, and everyone. We tried to make sure everyone's aligned, that we're all focused, that if it comes to working in this museum for the next 4 months, we're all aligned that we have to make sure that the museum going, the exhibition going experience is as good as it can possibly be. So that's essentially how this is, how we pull something like this off, is that everybody has to be very closely aligned, and so that we all know what the mission is, we all know what the intended goal is, so that when we get to January 23rd, that hopefully everyone can feel good about the job we've done in serving our public in the very best way possible.
It sounds absolutely fascinating. So, as your leaders are going out and they're talking to their teams, how are you engaging and soliciting feedback from your team, right? I mean, like, you have to have security officers, people that lead tours, even environmental services that are telling you, hey, if you're going to do this, you need to X, Y, Z, right? Like, how are you getting that feedback out, and then what are you doing with it?
So it's all about communication, and it's about being present. So all the leaders, many of whom can have the luxury of working a Monday through Friday business schedule under normal circumstances. Everyone knows this is an all hands on deck kind of exhibition, and so all of us are to be here, working weekends, because that's when we're busy, and that's when we know our teams need support. So, for instance, I can use myself as an example. At the exhibition open weekend before last, and I've been here. I was here the entire opening weekend, open to close. Here last weekend, open to close. I've already scheduled myself to be in the museum, open to close. And then for the other leaders, I have an actual operational calendar that I've built out, because I want to know who's here on what days. I don't need to know specific hours, and not looking to try and micromanage things, but I do want to know who's here on what days, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, supporting the operation, because I know that's what the team members need. They need that second layer of support. And then you asked about how do we get feedback? Well, part of the way that we get feedback is by being on the floor, right? If you're on the floor, you're experiencing what the team members, the frontline team members are experiencing. So that helps give you an idea. We also are asking for lots of feedback from the team. In fact, after our let's see, was that the first Sunday it was after the Saturday we were open. I expected it to be a 15-minute wrap-up meeting. We called all of the frontline team members that were serving our visitors, had them all gather just to have a quick meeting. That 15 minutes turned into an hour. The team was willing to stay an hour after the close of the museum, because we had a lot to talk about and unpack and figure out, okay, if this wasn't working the way we expected it, what is it we need to do? So that when we knew that when we opened the museum on Sunday morning, that we were going to have some of the kinks that we found on that first Saturday, have those worked out. And that was really helpful. And that process doesn't stop. I mean, we continue to change and modify. We made a change from this past Saturday to the past Sunday in how we were going to operate, even just queuing to get into the exhibition. But that was based in great part with feedback from the department heads, from the supervisors, and from the frontline team members. I mean, it's talk about a team sport.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that everybody can empathize with here, right, is that, once you dig into a major operation, whether it's a major event or it's, any sort of opening or any kind of thing like that, regardless of what the business is, you got to get people involved. You got to get their feedback, and you got to make sure that you're putting their practices into action, right? One of the things that's always fascinated me is how you're able to, how are you able to, in your example, right? You found you needed to make a change, how you were queuing people, right? How do you get almost that immediate adoption down so that you are making the change, then it's rolled out to the client, right? The guest.
Yeah.
And you're all moving on the same, how are you getting that immediate adoption for change? Because a lot of people push back against change.
Yeah. So in this case, the staff were not resistant at all, because they were looking for, a solution, a way to make it easier to queue our visitors to get into the exhibition. So they were, I think, they were pretty happy that we that we could pivot on a dime. And the word I like to use is that is nimble, that we can be nimble as a team and as an organization to make changes. And I like to always refer back to when I worked in the hotel business. And that's one of the things I loved about working in a hotel, is that, all of the folks that work in hotels tend to be pretty nimble. We have to make decisions, on a dime. We have to be able to change and pivot with that change and be good with that change very quickly, because, in hotels, the guests, they don't care, so if I had, when I was a hotel manager, if it's 4 o'clock, if check-in time is at 3 o'clock, and at 4 o'clock, we have a line of guests waiting at the not going to call it admissions desk, because I'm now thinking
the front desk, right?
with my museum hat on, but at the front desk, they don't care that there were call-offs in housekeeping. All they know is, I want my room. It's 4 o'clock. Why am I not in my room? And so everybody, it's all hands on deck. You get up, you run up on those floors, you strip beds, you empty garbage, you do whatever you need to do. You run linen to help the housekeeping ladies out so that they can get those rooms turned and we can get the guests in as quickly as possible. And it's kind of the same thing in this case here at the museum, where we knew that we were struggling with queuing the visitors and getting them into the exhibition in a way where we met their expectation, right? It was really about meeting the visitor's expectation on how quickly we could get them in. And it really didn't take a lot, but what it did take was that a couple people on the team knew from past experience exactly how to run a really great queue. And so those folks stepped into place. They did a very quick training with the team on Sunday morning, like a crack, it's like a crack training on how to run a big queue for a popular exhibit. And I have to tell you, where we experienced some pain points the day before and the weekend before with feedback from visitors, we did a 180, and I was fascinated to talk to one of the supervisors, and he said, Elliott, I have to tell you, today we didn't have one complaint about getting into the exhibition versus, he said, yesterday when I think I fielded 30 complaints. So, again, going back to that term I use, it's about our ability to be nimble and be open and receptive to making changes that we think will work. And if it doesn't work, well, then you try something else. You do it until you find that process that is what is needed.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I think that's phenomenal. I think your team's definitely got to feel that empowerment when, they know that they have the answer. You're like, well, they give it, let's get you out in front of everybody. Let's have you teach them how to do this. We're going to run with it. We tried our thing last week. It didn't work so well. Let's go ahead and try your thing. And then it worked. Right. That's gotta feel great for them.
I hope it does. And I haven't asked, what I did ask was, and my boss, who's the director of this museum, he was on the floor too. Every single minute on the weekends, he was on the floor, checking in with the visitors, checking in with the staff. And he asked one young lady, he said, are you feeling better? Is today better? And, and she said, yes, it's better. And so I think that was gratifying for him, but I hope it was also gratifying for that young lady to know that the director of the museum was standing there right alongside her, willing to do whatever he needed to do. In fact, he told me, he said, Elliott, I'm not the director today. I'm just a volunteer. Tell me what to do. You guys tell me where you want me. And that's the way I think, again, this isn't unique to the DIA. This is universal for any organization. It's the way a healthy organization should operate, that everyone is willing to roll up their sleeves, jump in, do whatever it takes to get the job done. And the other thing I wanted to say, Chris, was when you asked about planning, something that I neglected to say, but I thought it was an important step for us, is that over the summer, we held 3 all-staff Van Gogh exclusive planning meetings. And in each meeting, we had specific agendas laid out so that we could talk about varying components of the exhibition plan with as many staff members as that were as interested as possible to attend. And then, of course, we sweeten the deal a little bit by throwing a happy hour.
Well, you got to do something, right?
Yeah, right. So afterward, we would, we invited all of our teams over to another space we call Kresge Court in the museum, and where we were able to have cocktails and a few snacks. And it was a way for us to also prepare for the opening of Vincent, because some of the items served at these happy hours, the food and beverage team was planning for for the menu for Vincent.
I love it. I just, engaging and empowering your team to create that experience is absolutely phenomenal. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, what branch of the industry you're in, everybody understands that, that shoulder to shoulder mentality of being able to, get these things executed and just run with it. I love it. Absolutely awesome. So Elliott, I always like to wrap the show up, right, with asking a question, which is, as you have new leaders come into your operation, what kind of advice are you giving them, as they're entering your space?
Wow, that's a really good question. I have to think back to the last new leader that entered into the museum that I work very closely with, and the last person is a lady who moved over from a different area in the museum where she worked very independently, and then she moved into the operational side of the museum. And based on her feedback to me directly, which was incredibly gratifying, I have to tell you, she said she has never felt like she has been part of a team more than moving over into operations. And it's because I think, number one, the leaders enveloped her. They really kind of, figuratively put their arms around her and made her know, you are part of a team, and we all work shoulder to shoulder. We all support one another in absolutely any endeavor. And that is true. I'm very fortunate to be able to say that I get to work with an incredible team of folks that support one another. If our director of visitor experience needs help from our protection services director or from our building operations leader, they take care of it immediately. And so, and I try to impart that to people, like in this case, when Felicia moved over into ops, that you're part of a team. We're going to support you. We are a collective unit. And we talk about it actually quite often. We meet weekly as a division, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. And we talk about the fact that we're a team, and we always do a round robin in the meeting, and we talk about what are each of the individual leaders and their teams, what are their needs, what are they working on, what do they need to do their jobs better.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So, Elliott, as we're wrapping up here, if people want to find out more about the DIA, find out more about the Van Gogh exhibit, where are they going?
So you can go online to www.dia.org. You'll find everything you need at our website. And I hope many listeners will do a little research and want to come to the DIA, not only to see Van Gogh in America, but just to check out what I think is one of the most extraordinary collections in America. And I would love to welcome as many hospitality leaders to not only the DIA, but to Detroit as possible.
That is absolutely wonderful. And I guarantee you people are going there right now because you've made this sound like an absolutely phenomenal exhibit. So thank you very much, Elliott. I appreciate it and look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. Talk soon.
Take care.